Morning.
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 Only curiosity about the fate of others, the ability to put ourselves in their shoes, and the will to enter their worlds through the magic of imagination creates the shock of recognition. Without this empathy, there can be no genuine dialogue, and we as individuals and nations will remain isolated and alien, segregated and fragmented. If you could actually stand in someone's shoes to hear what they hear, see what they see, and feel what they feel, you would honestly wonder what planet they live on, and be totally blown away by how different their reality is from yours. You'd also never in a million years be quick to judge again. Wayne Dyer reminds us, judgment prevents us from seeing the good that lies beyond appearances. Plato said, "Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle." Anais Nin writes, "You cannot save people, you can only love them." When we listen to one another heart to heart, we unfold and expand.
Larry, how you doing? You feeling good? We're having a picnic next Sunday.
We are having a picnic next Sunday.
What's the sign for picnic? Picnic? Picnic. What does that mean? I thought maybe it meant eating outside on the ground. But no, it just means picnic. Well, good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Well, we are talking about compassion. And I thought about asking you to sort of help me in the beginning. If I had a couple points, maybe I can give you the points and you can fill in the blanks for me. If I were going to do that, let's see, I would probably say my first point is that most people are alike. Do you think that's true?
Nope.
No. Deb, do you think it is? How are we alike?
We all want acceptance and love. We're all.
For sure, we all want love. And by the way, thank you for speaking. You spoke last week. Very fun. Very fun. Thank you. And so we want acceptance and love. Physically, we're somewhat alike. I mean, we have a couple eyes. Most of us do. We have a mouth. We have a heart. And a couple of lungs, probably. And so most of us have those things. And how else are we alike? What else comes to mind? Okay. We all have ego occasionally. Any other way, Kate, you think of? Anything else pops in mind? We love knitting. You know, genetically, they say that human beings, regardless of how we look or where we come from, they used to say that we were 99.9% alike genetically. But now they've revised that, and now they're saying, well, maybe it's 99, and they've even gone to maybe 96, 97, because now they say we're not so much alike. There's more differences than they knew before, and so that's interesting, and so that gets me to my second point. First point is, all of us are alike. The second point is, we're not alike at all. Because, you know, the fingerprints, all of our fingerprints are different, and that fingerprint, that difference flows through our whole body and our spirit and our psyche, our spirit. You know, we're all different. I understand you can even do voice things now so that you can know who someone is just by the voice pattern. And so there's lots of differences. And we don't take that into consideration most of the time. Because most of the time we're living, as Kate just mentioned, in our ego. So we're living inside of our own world. And we don't really take into account that our world, our perception may be very different than everybody else. You know, you can almost think of your head as a globe, a world within itself. And so that's your head. And if you look around, there's several heads in here. Most bodies that came in today had a head. And so those heads are experiencing their own reality. Every head in here has a belief system, an emotional system, and perception, and perspective, and they have their own value system. They have their own memories. They, every person in here's had thousands of interactions. And with every interaction you've had, you've changed a bit. And nobody else had the same interactions. And the way you viewed the interaction maybe somewhat depended on your chemistry, your makeup. And so I am really amazed that we get along as well as we do. And it's amazing that some people couple up and get married and become partners and have relationships. That's an amazing thing. Although the truth is, probably many people in those situations don't have a clue who the other person is. I mean, maybe they've lived with a person for 50 years, but they really don't know much other than, he likes eggs and she likes broccoli. Because we're so different, and it involves so many different things. I read that back about early 1900s, a European psychiatrist said that people can be divided into two major groups, schizoid and cycloid. I'm cycloid. I don't know what you are, but so that's kind of funny. And then Hippocrates years and years ago divided people into four groups. And he said things like there was a group phlegmatic and choleric and sanguine and what else? Melancholy, I mentioned. So those four groups, and everybody would fit into one of those groups. And of course now, they say that's not really all that reliable either. And then, what was her name? Isabel Myers. You know her? She came up with a deal with her, along with her mother, who was Catherine Briggs. And so it was the, what's he called?
Myers-Briggs.
Oh, yeah, their last names. There you go. Myers-Briggs inventory. And so, everybody got into that, and it showed four contrasts. And how many of you have taken that? See, almost everybody. I, just in case you were wondering, am INFP. Are you shocked?
Nope.
Some of you are. So no, I thought so. And so, we're all very different. And words mean different things. I say tomato and you say tomato, and we have all these different ideas. I come from Harlan, Kentucky, and so I use certain words sometimes, and Mary Pat will say, well, I don't know what that means. I've never heard that before. And so all of us, what'd you say, Bob?
Psychotic.
Say what?
Psychotic. Ever heard of that?
No, is that one of your words?
No.
Where did that come from?
Appalachian words.
Where did it come from?
Appalachian Mountains.
Now, what's the word again?
Psychotic.
No, I've not heard that. What does it mean?
Whopper jaw. It means it's
That's
crooked.
good.
It's crooked.
It's crooked. Well, that just makes the point. Sometimes, people use different words, and then sometimes you don't even get what they're pointing at. So you have all these different worlds, and, we're trying to communicate with all of that. And I think if we're going to have compassion, it means we understand what's happening in the other person's world. And sometimes in the other person's world, there's a great deal of suffering. You'd be surprised sometimes at the suffering that takes place inside of people, sometimes physical, sometimes emotional, sometimes spiritual, sometimes financial. It could be anything. And often we don't even know anything about that. But the first thing I think we have to do if we're going to have compassion is we really want to be able to center ourselves. Jesus said, love others as you love yourself. And so you've got to love yourself. And to me, that means you've got to find a safe place of strength to operate from. Now, that is well said. I've never heard it said so well, and I didn't know it was going to come out, but there it was. Can't say it again, but you get the idea. You want to have this powerful center that you're operating from so that you are not needy, so that you do not have an agenda. You are not into winning, and you are not into manipulating. You're not into getting your way. Does this sound like you yet? You're not into any of those things because you're so spiritually centered that all is well in your life. And so you're functioning at that high level. And then, maybe, perhaps, if someone is sitting in front of you or standing in front of you, you at least have a shot at understanding what's happening inside their heart, their globe, their world, their mind. But if we're so tied up in our own stuff, there's so many blocks we likely are never really going to know because we're so busy interacting with our own stuff. Does that make sense to you? I mean, so see, that's just really true. There's so many things. I mean, it could be that you look at life through the lens of finance, and you look through it from the lens of scarcity. The person you're talking to looks through it through the lens of prosperity. And so there's just big conflict. Maybe my lens that I look at life through is I was abused as a child. And you look at life through your lens, which is life is fantastic. And so you can see how we might see the world in different ways. You know, I'm coming from the left brain and you're coming from the right. And so we have very different ideas. Our perspectives are vastly different. And so the first thing we've got to do, if we're even going to get close to having compassion for another human being, is we have to be strong and secure within ourselves. And then it doesn't matter what we hear. See, we're so afraid of what we might hear, especially, you know, if it's a stranger, we don't really care. But if it's somebody close to us, they could say something to devastate us. So you have to be undevastatable because you're within yourself and you're in your own power center and you have your own boundary. I think that can make a big difference. People hurt a lot. Karen Armstrong talks about Buddha. You know, she's written a number of books, and she tells the Buddha story, and she says Buddha, you know, lived in this palace, and he was protected from everything. He didn't know anything about suffering at all. And then, Andy will help me if I miss on this, but he saw he finally went out and he saw someone who was sick, and he saw someone who was old, and he saw a corpse, someone who had died. And then he saw a monk sitting at the side of the road begging for food. And Buddha was so upset over that. And he said, I'm going to devote the rest of my life to a way to deal with suffering. Now, like so many stories we read in the Bible, I think that probably didn't even happen that way. Probably just a myth. But you know what the myth tells us? It tells us that before we can even begin to have compassion for other people, we have to engage suffering. We have to engage suffering. I know we'd rather run from suffering. Nancy Lee was saying that. We'd rather run from it, but if we run from it, we never really get the idea. Compassion, if you look compassion up in some dictionaries, they'll wrongly tell you that it means pity. But that's not what compassion means. It's not, I feel sorry for you. Compassion, passion means suffering, and calm, of course, means with. So it means I feel with you. It means I suffer with you, alongside of you. And so, you know, all the religions put suffering up there. Like it's something we need to think about. We need to talk a little bit about it. I used to really love Albert Schweitzer. Any of you know Albert Schweitzer? I mean, I know you don't know him personally. It was funny to me because a year or two ago I said, how many of you know Albert Schweitzer? And I expected everybody to say, oh yeah. Because as a kid, he was a hero of mine. I stole I mean, I borrowed a book from the library, and actually I think I stole the book, but it was about his life story, and I just so admired him. As a little boy, he saw a horse lame, and he just agonized over the pain of that horse. And his compassion caused him to become a medical doctor. And he became a missionary. He believed in, he was a Christian, and yet in a very broad kind of way, very much like many of you are. He ended up in Africa, and he treated thousands of people and thousands of animals as well. He said this, "I could not help continually thinking of others who have been denied their happiness because of poverty or lack of health." And he gave his entire life to make a difference. Elvis, remember him? He had a song 40 years ago, believe it or not. And he said, "If I could be you, and if you could be me for just an hour, if we could find a way to get inside each other's minds, if you could see you through my eyes instead of your own ego, I believe you would be surprised to see how we've been blind. Walk a mile in my shoes. Before you abuse, criticize, and accuse, walk a mile in my shoes." Pretty good words from Elvis there. Pretty good words. In the Semitic language, compassion is connected to the word womb. And so it's maternal affection. It's a matrix of love and care. And I really like that because it just feels so warm to me. Now, Stephen Covey is one smart guy. And if you want to have a happier life, Stephen Covey has some good things to say. And in his book about 7 habits of something, in that book he wrote a long time ago, he has one big principle that applies here. And the principle is this: seek first to understand and then to be understood. Now that is really, really smart. It's smart because that's not what we do. Listening is a big part of understanding. And if you go to a counselor, the counselor will tell you, men, you need to listen to your wives. And you as a husband might say, "What? I'm sorry, I wasn't listening." And then he or she will say, and it doesn't have to be a man, it could be anybody, but men especially get accused of this. And then they'll say, "Well, repeat back what she said," or "repeat back what your partner said." And so, you reflect it back and you focus on the words and that kind of thing. And all of that stuff can be helpful, but man, that misses really the big point. Not that I'm against that. I think that stuff is good. Anything that helps is going to be good. But the key goes much deeper. And I want to give you the key today. Because I want our lives to be compassionate. And so here's the key. The key is, once we understand empathy, it is a profound paradigm shift. The world is turned upside down once we understand what empathy really means. Because you and I normally seek to be understood. People will say, "I just want you to listen. I just want you to understand me." That's what we want more than anything else. I just want someone to understand, and then I'll understand you later. Don't worry about it. When I understand you, I'll let you know. But right now, you just need to understand me. Now, we may not say it like that, but we live it like that in any kind of relationship just about. So our new paradigm is this. And you can see if you will commit to it, the new paradigm is understand first. Understand first. Say with me, I will understand first.
I will understand first.
Now, if you really set that intention, and it has to be a deliberate intention. You're not just going to wake up like an egg and turn into a chicken. You've got to deliberately set the intention. Today, I am going to understand first. And even if I'm never understood, I'm secure within my boundary. Everything's all right. And so that's how we function. Because most of us, when somebody's talking, be honest, either you, either I, either we are speaking or we are getting ready to speak. We're speaking or we're designing our argument that we're going to present. Most of the time we listen and we communicate on one of four levels. We never make it to level 5, probably. Level 1 is when we ignore the person altogether. How many of you do that? Thank you. Level 2, you may pretend to listen, and I can pretend to listen, and when I do that, I'll say, yeah, yeah, right, yeah. And then, they say, could you repeat that? Oh, what? Yeah. Level 3 is when we practice selective listening, so we listen to some things that interest us, and the other, we tune out. Level 4, it's getting better, we practice attentive listening, and this is where I do pay attention to the words, and I repeat the words back to you. But I am still thinking about me. I'm still thinking about what I'm going to say in response to this. So I'm not really tuning in to understand. I'm just getting the words down so I can use those to make my point. That's right. And then level 5, which normally we don't get to, would be empathetic listening. And that means that I am actually listening to what that person says with the view of understanding what they mean. Now, the problem with it is we have so many filters. And so when somebody is talking, I'm running my own home movies into everything they say. When they're talking, I'm reading my autobiography into everything they say. They say something and I think, yeah, my mom used to say that. Yeah, my mom said that one time. Yeah, I know my cousin said that one time. I know that happened to my uncle once, and then this happened, and then that happened. And so, we're running so we have all of that, all those stories. Can you imagine coming to someone absolutely blank, and you look them in the eye and you say, I want to understand you. Now that would be hot. And you're not saying it to be hot because you're sincere. I want to know you. That is hot. I want to know you. I want to understand. And we're not putting our stories, see, we're not stuffing our home movies into all of that. And so and you're not listening with the purpose of winning. I mean, it's a great thing. It's a great thing. And so this reflective listening is cool and everything, but the real key is going to be setting the intention, I want to understand. And in counseling with couples, I used to encourage them to use those 3 magic words, and I thought of it in the first service. I hadn't planned to say that, but I think it's valuable to say. And the 3 magic words are, tell me more. And that's helpful because that sets you up. That sets the tone for you to say, tell me more. So you can't go into your story. You can't go into your defense. Tell me more. And it's just open. You're just open. You're just open. You turn into a big ear. But you got to listen with your ears. They say communication, like 10% is just the words. And I read 30% are sounds, which means, that's sounds. 30% of communication sounds. 10% words. 60% body language. And so that means you want to listen with your ears. But see, you just get started then. And so then you want to listen with your eyes. And then you want to listen with your heart. And your goal, your purpose is to actually understand what is happening in that person. Because I tell you what we need more than anything else. We need accurate information. And almost nobody has accurate information on anybody. We don't even have accurate information on ourselves. And so that's how we begin. We stop assuming feelings. We stop assuming all of that. Because that person has a world of their own. And we want to... And I'll tell you this too. I'm not going to tell you this either. But this is important because I mentioned this to somebody the other day. And they said, oh, that's really helped me. If you're in a relationship... Normally relationships, if you can picture, this is one and this is two. Person A, person B. And normally, they come together like this. And when they come together and touch, it's fantastic. I feel as if I've known you forever. It's so good. And it is, and it's beautiful. But then, one of those silly people will begin to pull away. And then it goes like this. And so if this one panics and goes after that one, no, come back, then this one is going to run. And so it never works that way. And so they never really know each other. If we understand relationships do this, that's a healthy relationship. Because when they do this, they're both strong, independent, powerful within. And then when they come together, they share their lives, and it's fantastic. And then when they do this, everything's cool too. And so that's how it can be. And as they do that, they're strong within themselves, and yet they're wanting to know what's happening in the other person's world. Somebody said that it's healing if someone just listens to you. Now, they don't have to agree with you. Once you spill everything out and you say, now, do you agree? Don't be expecting agreement. Because that's not the deal. I mean, you're expecting someone to listen and someone to be kind. That's what you're going to give someone. It doesn't mean you always agree with them because, man, their world is screwed up. Only your world is cool. Only your world is right. And so you got your world going and everybody else's world is kind of mixed up, right? You understand I'm being funny there. All of our worlds are a little crazy. And so you don't expect agreement. You don't have to give an agreement. It just means that you're understanding. It means you're listening and understanding. And I actually read about this. There was a person talking to, this is at work, and this is important to say, because I think a lot of us do this. I hate to confess, but I've done it. That's hard to believe, I know. You're thinking, oh man. But we become psychologists in relationships or in friendships. This happened at work. The person was saying, well, I'm having this problem right here in work, and this is not working well. And the boss interrupted and said, well, you know this goes back to your childhood issues. Now that is a deadly thing to do. Because as soon as someone does that to you, and if they've done it to you, you know how that feels. You've just become an object. You just became a non-person. And when we do that, we're using pop psychology and we're no longer even listening to the person. So that's not empathy. Empathy never does that. Because empathy says, tell me more. Tell me more. There's no judgment. Tell me more. Because we aren't qualified to be judging anyway. You know how complex people's worlds are, and so we don't want to dismiss people in that way. That can be very harmful. Let's see, how did I want to conclude this? I figured that some of you might say, well, how can I increase my empathy? First thing you want to do is meditate. Because meditation increases your self-awareness. And your brain actually uses the same equipment in self-awareness as in empathy. So the more you know yourself, the more likely you'll be empathetic with other people. You know, they did a study with monkeys. I was going to tell you this before, but I didn't. They did a study with monkeys, and the monkeys had little hats on with electrodes and such, and when the monkeys would pick up their food, a certain part of the brain would light up. And then just accidentally, they noticed when the monkeys saw other people picking up their food to eat, same area would light up. So then they began to look at that, and they're called mirror neurons. And they found out human beings have those too, and ours are much larger than monkeys, although chimpanzees are pretty close to us. That's our first cousin. Do you know any chimpanzees? Very similar, very similar. But, okay, so what they found out is if, say, someone goes to the doctor and they get a shot, and that's a pain stimulus, and so a certain part of your brain lights up. But if you see your son or daughter get a shot, the same area lights up. And so it's that equipment, those cells in your brain that give you the power to have compassion and empathy. What's cool about that is that means you have been wired, even down to a cellular level, to feel what other people feel. And the way you can increase that is, number one, be kind to people. When you meet someone, you say under your breath, I wish you joy. When someone runs you off in traffic, I wish you peace. When someone serves you at the store, I wish you health. And you're doing that constantly. I'm not fooling around here. When you see someone walk through the door, I wish for you peace. I wish for you joy. Buddha said if we do that, it begins to build a mental habit, and it begins to be our instinct, and then we become just like a blessing factory. So everywhere we go, we're blessing people. That's not going to happen unless we deliberately do it. And so sometimes people, Jerome and I were talking earlier about, we have basic principles and then we have advanced principles. And so I would say this is black belt territory. If you think higher principles are going on psychic trips to the moon, you're just being funny. Let me tell you what the real high teaching is. Love. The real high teaching is empathy. The real high teaching is compassion. And practicing it every single day. In each moment, you're doing it with your children. You're doing it with your parents. You're doing it with everybody you meet. See, that's what we're about. Your job, whether you accept it or not, and all the religions stand behind me and agree with this, your job is to relieve suffering. Your job is to relieve suffering. That's what Jesus said. That's what Buddha said. That's what Muhammad said. That's what everybody's saying. Zoroaster said. The Quran. The Quran talks about how that God was speaking to Muhammad and said, you remember when you were a child, you were an orphan. You had such a horrible time in life. And so now, relieve the suffering of the orphan. See? And so that's the teaching. And so that's your job. And so you're this powerful being. If you think you're just a weak, namby-pamby being, then that's all you do, and you're going to feel like something's missing all the time. But if you are this powerful, loving being moving through life, and you're just blessing everybody, and you're feeling and sending that love out, just like we did in the meditation. Does that make sense, Bob? I mean, you know what your purpose is. Your purpose is to make a difference in people's lives. You've told me that. Oh, yeah, that was confidential. No, just kidding. So, I'm not kidding about Bob feels that way. Many of you feel that way. We're here to make a difference. We're here to relieve suffering. And so when we begin to do that, that's how we begin to grow in what we are doing. And the other thing is this, and you may not like this, but it's true, and I need to mention it, and that is, we tend to like people that look like us. That is our tribal instinct. If you're a Republican, you gotta like those Republicans. You identify with them. Democrat, then you identify with those people. I'm an independent. Yeah, I identify with those people. And so we feel that way. And, if I am talking to someone and they don't have much hair, I mean, obviously, We're brothers. We identify with each other. And people with all this hair stuff, see, you get what I mean. So we do that at a physical level, but we also do it at a mental level. And so anytime we think, I watched a show a couple of days ago, and I can't remember the name of it. God, it was a great show. Oh, it had that guy, ladies, who was in the movie that you saw last night. What was the star's name? Who? What was the star's name? What's the other guy's name? The guy Matthew McConaughey. Yeah, yeah. I'm sure all of you ladies have seen this movie. Yeah, we men are going to go see it later. Anyway, Matthew McConaughey was in the movie. He was an attorney, and a little girl was raped.
Time to Kill.
Time to Kill. Great movie. Powerful movie. And in that movie, he's going along, and it's a trial, and so a little African-American girl was just mistreated in every way you can imagine. And at the end of it, he goes through that. He describes it. And so you have all these little jurors, they're taking it all in. And he describes it, and everybody's crying. I'm sitting there, watching the movie by myself, and I'm crying. And then, Matthew, of course, he's an actor, he's crying too. And he says all of that, and then he says this. He said, and imagine she's white. And then the father looked at him and went, because the father was saying, okay, you did it. You did a good job. And what is my point? The point is, physically, human beings identify more with people who look like them. So what does that mean? It means your job as spiritual beings is to look at each person and say, just like me. Just like me. Just like me. Now, most of us are more mature, so we don't do that maybe we don't do that with color maybe. Or maybe we don't do it with ethnicities, nationality. Maybe we don't do that. But how do you do it? When is it you say, oh yeah, that person's different? Yeah, that's a different kind of person. Yeah, they're educated. They went to college, or they went to graduate school. They went to Harvard. Or they didn't go to school at all. They dropped down to 5th grade. I don't know how you might do it, but we don't want to do that at all. Just like us. If we don't do that, we have no compassion. Just like us. Just like me. Just like me. Just like me. I heard on the radio, and this happened some time ago, when Haiti had all their problems, and there was a Marine who had just come home. Did any of you hear this? It was yesterday, on the radio, and he said, I heard all their problems, and he said, I'm going to go do something about it. He put on Facebook he wanted to go, and then 3 or 4 of his buddies said, we'll go with you. And he said they were taking care of people, and they got there, some of the first people, and so people, their limbs have been sawn off just by storms and things falling on them, I guess, or, buildings falling on them. And said they were helping all these people. And he said there was such suffering. We were there to make a difference. And I just thought, compassion. And then he made the statement, and those people were just like us. See, they were losing people they loved, just like us. In Japan, when all that happened, can you imagine? Just like us. See, they're just like you. They love their children, just like you. They love their parents, just like you. They love their spouse, their partner, their friend, just like you do. So that's what compassion means. And it begins with such a small thing. It begins with such a small little thing. And that is, just begin to bless each person. Begin to bless each person. And the great thing about it is, when you begin to give joy to people, joy becomes yours. Some of you have been working so hard all your life trying to find it. It was in your pants the entire time. Let's change that now. Let's say it was in your shirt the entire time. Let's just say it was in your heart the entire time. And happiness, you've been looking for it. It was in you the entire time. Peace, if you just have peace of mind, it was in you the entire time. But you don't experience it until you give it away. And I'm not just saying that because that sounds cool, because that's like a quote. You don't experience it until you give it away. And so as soon as you walk out of here, when you see somebody, you can even begin right here. After we break up, when you see somebody and you say, well, see you next week, good to meet you, under your breath say, I see you having joy. I see you having peace. I see you knowing who you are. I mean, see, that is just really something. So look around. See, you're surrounded by such beautiful people. Close your eyes for just a second. So we, as a community today, are thankful for love. Yes. Amen. Thank you. Compassion is good stuff. Compassion is good stuff.